my beautiful people, welcome back to my channel. In today's video we're talking about cool tone eyeshadow palettes that I have in my collection. I have just over 20 different palettes to show you today. Some of them are going to be a little bit more on the true cool tone gray taupey type of side, and some palettes will be with a little bit of color, however still on the cool tone side. If you're new here, if this is your first time watching my video, this is a fun video for you to walk into, so welcome. And this is a part of the mini series that I started in December 2023, so a few episodes of the eyeshadow palette content is already out, and I will have it linked for you in the description box. So I want to do a small disclaimer before we get started. I do have a quite a good amount of content here on my channel about eyeshadow palettes. If that's something that you enjoy, there's plenty of that to watch. I will have some of the playlist linked for you in the description box if you would like to binge watch. I am a considerably small channel. Most of the makeup products I purchased myself. However, there are very few palettes that were sent to me in the PR. Also, if I have any discount codes with the brands, I will pop them here on the screen for you, and they are also always linked for you in the description box and in the header of my Instagram. I hope you enjoyed this video, and subscribe if you're not yet a subscriber. And now, without further ado, let's dive into my cool tone eyeshadow palette collection. So the first palette that I have here is collab between Glamlite and Hershey's Cookies and Cream collection. This is a 12 pan eyeshadow palette, a very nice cool tone eyeshadow palette, very nice balance between mattes and shimmers, and the formula, both mattes and shimmers in this palette, is exceptionally good, like 10 out of 10. I do have a dedicated video on this eyeshadow palette, but I really find these blue tones very flattering on my pale complexion. They're not as harsh. Some of these shades are just spectacular, especially shimmers. One of the best palettes that I've tried this year for sure. Milk Chocolate palette from Glamlite. What a fun packaging on this one, and very interesting, very curated color story on this one. This matte formula from Glamlite was a little bit different from the Hershey's palette that I showed you, and the shimmers here are excellent. The mattes were a little bit on a drier side. They required a little bit more work. However, this color story is really pretty. I really love that you do get these mattes to create your base of the look. So you can also do full matte looks if that's what you like. And then you have different shimmer formulas to play with to differentiate your looks. These shimmers are just very beautiful, smooth and reflective. Excellent formula. The next palette that I have is Soft and Sultry from Milani. This is a palette that has been discontinued quite some time ago, and I purchased it because I wanted to have something more of a cool tone in my collection, and also have something more affordable in my collection within this color category. So that's why I had this palette. I think that the quality that Milani used for this eyeshadow palette was very, very nice. I hope they will just use this formula in the future in other palettes, because from what I've tried from them since this palette, I have not liked so much. So this was a really nice formula. This next palette is the Taupes by Juvia's Place. This was their 6 pan. This is the formula that is slightly bit different from the previous palettes that Juvia's Place used to have. All these shades here, they seem to be more firmly pressed. So the mattes require a little bit of building up to do, and the shimmers I prefer to pick up with my fingers. Because they're firmly pressed, it's a little bit difficult to pick them up with a brush. Generally, the looks that come out of this palette, they're a little bit more on the lighter side. This next palette right here is from the brand Lamora Attractions palette. This palette I purchased from Amazon. Lamora brand is on Amazon. This is the color story that resembles Natasha Denona Glam palette, and I knew that I was not going to buy that palette, and that's why this palette appealed to me, because it does have 4 very neutral shades and a lot of shimmers to pick from. There are different like shades and undertones basically. So you have some rosy ones, some champagne shades, and then there's a silver shade here. This one is a little bit more on the bronzy brown side. Very nice palette, easy to work with, and very affordable palette. I think it was maybe $12 or something within that price range. Very affordable, and I know that I like to reach for it because it's quite neutral. Mid-tone shades, they are more of your true neutrals. However, once I start using this darker shade in my outer corner, it actually pulls quite cool on me. So generally, I consider this palette to be more of a cool tone eyeshadow palette than a true neutral. So this next palette that I have here is one that has beautiful packaging. I love this packaging. I also really like this palette, Sultry from Anastasia Beverly Hills. I haven't had this palette for too long. I purchased it way after this palette was launched, and I really like this palette. I really also appreciate that shade right there. I know they just relaunched the 9 pan smaller version of this without that shade, but I really think that that shade makes a lot of difference. I really like the quality of this palette. Also, this is a perfect holiday palette. But this next palette over here is from Huda Beauty, the Wild Jaguar. I know that this palette was not loved by more people than the people who loved it. I was the person who loved it. I really like this palette, even though cool tone neutrals are probably not my most used eyeshadows, but in a cooler season, sometime around New Year's, in winter, December, January, I do like to reach for my cooler tone eyeshadow palette. What makes it for me in this palette is the variety of shimmers, because there's like purple ones, there's gold, there's green, and these shimmers are very beautiful. This is why I really like this palette, because you do get somewhat a cooler tone, very nice smoky base for your looks, because there's also this beautiful matte black shade, and then you have a lot of fun shimmers to play with. The next palette I have here is the Blueberry Muffin from BH Cosmetics. This is a little bit more of your colorful eyeshadow palette. Some of these tones are super, super beautiful. Look how stunning these are. I mean, it's definitely very specific color story, but also is quite different in my collection. Cutie Palette Platinum from NABLA, 6-pan, very curated color story, but this silver shade is the most beautiful silver shade I've ever seen in my entire life. I'm not even exaggerating. This is the most stunning silver shade I've ever seen. And these shimmers are just like melted metals, as if somebody just melted something and put them here in the pans. They are stunning. They're gorgeous, smooth, reflective, very pigmented, opaque. Beautiful, beautiful. I love this palette so much. This is a perfect eyeshadow for holidays. Another palette that I'm very much loving that joined my collection this year, NOMAD Ghost Town USA. This is a colorful palette for a neutrals lover. So I really love the variety of shades here. There's definitely a lot of neutrality going on this side of the palette, and pops of color like this purple and beautiful like fun greens. But I really love these matte rose. These are so flattering. Matte eyeshadow formula from NOMAD Cosmetics is one of the best ones I have in my collection. I think it's just such a pleasure to work with. I really love this palette, and I really love this color story. It's very smartly made. Definitely one of the best palettes that I've tried. So this next one right here is from Alter Ego Coastal Palette. Very beautiful color story. I should show you this palette right away too. Next to it, Rose Quartz from Huda Beauty. Rose Quartz by Huda Beauty is one of my favorite palettes since the day it was launched. I purchased this palette when it was launched, and then the Coastal palette joined my collection this year. These two are twin sisters, let's say, but the quality of this palette very much surprised me. I do have a dedicated video on the Coastal palette comparing it to Huda Beauty if you wanted to see that, if you're interested. I do think that they are different formulas, of course, but the quality in Coastal is not lacking by all means. The shades are pretty much identical. I just very love this color story, period, and I think the formulas in both of these palettes are very, very good, even though they're different. I just love this color story. It's so unique, but you also get a lot of versatility because there's a beautiful depth in this palette, and the shimmers. Some of these shimmers are just simply unique. They are not your basic shimmers. There's a little bit of a complexity in the formulation. They just look so expensive, so luxury on eyes. I absolutely love these two palettes. Other cool tone palette that I have in my collection is Nude from Huda Beauty. This palette is no longer available. However, I still have it. There are some glitter shades here, which I never use. There are only 5 shimmers here. So primarily for me, this is matte eyeshadow palette, but I really love the formula. I think it's very easy to use. And also I really love the looks that come out of this palette. I know it's no longer available, but I really like this palette. The next one up is Natasha Denona, a retro palette. This is definitely a little bit more on your burgundy side, a little bit more curated. However, it's still cool tone palette, and it definitely pulls quite cool tone on me. I really enjoy burgundies and rosy tones. I do like that this palette gives you a little bit of neutrality. Like this shade is a little bit more neutral. This shade is a little bit more neutral. Like these two shades are more neutral. So you definitely can create more neutral looks rather than burgundy or rosy. I also consider burgundies neutral tones for me. I know this doesn't apply to everybody, but for me, I consider burgundies neutrals, and I really enjoy this palette. It has a lot of value for me. This next one is Smitten in Switzerland from BH Cosmetics. This is a little bit more colorful palette in a way, like muted jewel tones. This shade obviously is a little bit more warm, and this green one is a little bit more warm. Everything else pulls a very cool tone on me. I wear greens a lot, and burgundies, I consider those two pretty neutral shades for me. I have already filmed the green eyeshadow palette collection, so just in case you've missed out, that video is already live. So I really enjoy this palette. It definitely has versatility. So this next palette is from Natasha Denona Retro Glam palette, and I also will be showing this palette to you next to Sakura from Alter Ego. So these are pretty much sister palettes right here, same color story, just arranged slightly bit differently. I do have dedicated video on Sakura palette as well, comparing it to Retro Glam palette if you are interested. Both palettes have really nice formulas, even though they are different. I do love all these shades separately. I do consider these palettes my companion palettes. The color stories, or the color story rather, is lacking depth for me, but I do enjoy all these shades. I really love this area right here. It's a look on its own. Then I really love the rosy tones. I use these shades for transition quite a bit. I find them very flattering on my skin. And then this area right here is very, very lovely also. So all these tones I really love, but it is a more of a complementary companion palettes for me. Here, so this next palette is Jewels and Gem from Odin's Eye. I love this color story. It's definitely more colorful. However, the looks that come out of this palette are absolutely stunning. Absolutely stunning. The formula is 10 out of 10. I'm so happy I picked up this palette. And this is definitely one of the best and most unique palettes in my collection. I have to show you some of the shimmers here because I cannot not show you. These are stunning. This is my favorite shade in the palette. Absolutely gorgeous with this beautiful, almost like duochromish reflect. The shimmers are out of this world and the mattes are just so smooth, buttery, pigmented, easy to blend and build up. They blend into each other so effortlessly, and just the color story is absolutely gorgeous. Next palette I have to do an honorable mention to, because this palette has a lot of nostalgia for me. Naked by Urban Decay. I no longer use this palette. It's just here in my collection for memories. This was the very first high-end palette that I've ever purchased, and back then, and I'm talking about probably about 10-11 years ago, then this palette disappeared out of my work bag when I was working, and then I ended up repurchasing this palette. So this is technically my second palette of its kind. I am a huge neutrals lover. This color story does not look odd to me or outdated or anything like that. I still look at it and I see just very nice neutral looks, but this palette is very old and I primarily keep it for memories here. So the next palette that I have here is from Unearthly Cosmetics, and Not Normal. Beautiful design. What a beautiful design. And this is a color story, considerably colorful. However, it leans a very much of a cool undertone. I do like the matte formula in this palette better than shimmers. There are only 4 shimmers in this palette and they're more of like your satin effect. I do prefer a little bit brighter shimmers, but the color story generally is quite beautiful and quite unique to my collection. The last palette that I have here is a mini star from Natasha Denona. I love this palette so much, but as you can see, I have these rubber bands here because the packaging completely broke on it. I think I traveled with it and it got hit in a luggage, and unfortunately this happened. One of my favorite minis from Natasha Denona. I have quite a few of her mini palettes. If you are interested to see any of the Natasha Denona content here on my channel, I do have a dedicated playlist for Natasha Denona palettes. So you get 2 mattes here and 3 shimmers, and the shimmers are quite different here, very unique. This one was a duochrome shade and this green one was absolutely stunning, but I don't believe this palette is available anymore. I was very much heartbroken that the packaging broke, but I also cannot repurchase this, so I kind of have to make it work with the bands. These are all the eyeshadow palettes in the cool tone category that I have in my collection currently. I enjoy them. I think they are, for most part, all of them are excellent quality, and I reach for them quite a bit. The cool tone eyeshadow palette is definitely something that I prefer to use in the fall, winter, and around New Year's. I definitely get inspired by those beautiful cool tone color story. Let me know if you saw some of your favorites in this video, and if you love cool tone eyeshadow palettes, what is your favorite that you have in your collection? Share with me in the comment section below. If you enjoyed this video, give this a big thumb up. If you're not yet a subscriber, I invite you to subscribe before you leave today. And thanks so much for watching, hanging out with me today, and I will see you in my next videos. Bye.